everybody. It's mid-October in the Midwest, and frost and cold has set in earlier than usual. So we definitely have to do a lot of yard cleanup and some fall chores to get the yard and the gardens ready for fall, and so that they're also in good shape when it warms up in the spring. So join us today. We're going to show you kind of what we do, all our little chores, so that maybe you can do the same. Caveat here is that this is the Midwest, so depending on your area of the country, you might have obviously different plants, different needs. So this is definitely focused more in a Midwest yard or garden, but there might be some good tips for other gardens as well. So join me today with the Urban Domestic Diva and her urban garden. First thing we have to do is harvest whatever vegetables or fruit. These were a lot of tomatoes in some pots and buckets. We're going to harvest all of our fruit, and we'll see if we're going to maybe can some green tomatoes or have them ripen by the window and maybe make some late season tomato paste. Also, we've got a big garden over here, which we also let grow, hoping we'd have a couple more warm days, which we did, but it's time to take it all down. So we're gonna basically harvest what we can and then take our kind of wire structures and store them to the side of the garage and put some leaves and green clippings and kind of mix it in with the dirt for fall once we get everything out. So that's kind of job one, get our fruit and vegetable gardens under control. So one of the things we do here is, we've got a lot of pots. This is where one of my tomato plants lived, but I have a lot of pots, and all this is really great dirt. A little spent dirt, but it's still good dirt. I also have a lot of potted, I got window boxes, I got, potted flowers, and what I do is, after I'm harvesting everything and I rip everything out, I put down some tarp or garbage bags on this little brick area here. So I have more garbage bags to put down, but you can see here I dump all the dirt here in a pile. And then I mix in some mulched leaves and some grass clippings. You kind of need to mix in brown material as well as green material. And I just let it sit through the winter. And then come spring, this giant pile of dirt is kind of reborn a little bit. There's been composting happening, there's been snow breaking stuff down, and I can use this dirt again in my pots. So I dump everything out and I store my pots under my deck, upside down, and all the dirt goes here. So that's what we're doing. The other thing you want to do as you're kind of walking your garden is pulling out any ornamental things that aren't going to winter well, like this little bird bath I have. This has got to go under the deck and get stored. And if it can contain water, store it upside down, because the ice, water and ice and thaws and freezes will cause things like this to crack. So empty it out, wipe it out, and store it upside down. Because we ripped out everything out of the garden, and we took some of the dirt from the pots and mixed it in with that garden, and he's also mixing in some compost just to get that garden in a good spot. The snow will help, kind of blend and decompose everything there. Also, I've collected what was salvageable as far as vegetables. And believe it or not, I had a lot of eggplant still, so we're going to be doing some canning and some freezing definitely this week. Also, kind of organize and stage your cages, depending on the sizes, clean them off. You're going to store them somewhere safe. We usually store them on the other side of the garage. The other thing you have to do is collect pillows, wrap furniture. So collect all your outdoor pillows and put them into garbage bags or, I don't know, some protective bag, and keep them in the garage, keep them dry. And then the furniture we're gonna wrap in a tarp. If you're fancy pants and you can afford some of the furniture coverings from like Pottery Barn, that's great too. But we use bungee cords and tarp, and I'll show you that. Also, pieces that you don't really wanna move, like my mosaic bench right there, we'll probably wrap in some plastic or some tarp. Sometimes I'll move the top piece because it's so delicate. Sometimes I will move it into the garage some years. But keep that in mind, your delicate stuff in the garden. So collect your pillows everywhere, including your deck. Another cool thing we do in the fall, this is one bag. When we mulch our leaves, we get these big black garbage bags. And what we do is we tie it off and we poke holes. Once we get the leaves in there, we also mix in some potting soil, some green material, not too much, in with the leaves, mist it with some water from the hose, and tie it off and keep it in some sunlight. So this corner gets actually a lot of sunlight in the afternoon and in the morning. And yeah, it looks like you've got dead bodies around the house, but the cool thing that it does through the winter, as long as it's getting sun, it's going to decompose everything into some really, really great compost. For example, I'm going to show you, this is kind of I got this hamper at Goodwill, and I keep my compost in there, and it's really, really good stuff. And I like this hamper because it keeps air circulating with the compost that I made. That's my little bucket where I grab the compost for potting. But that's what happens to your mulched leaves if you do that throughout the winter. So that's something that we do in the fall. It's really cool. I think I'm going to wrap this in some tarp so that hopefully this wicker survives the winter. We'll see. Also, any other areas like a potting bench, take everything out, pack it all up, and we're going to wrap this with tarp as well and bungee cords so that this piece stays okay through the winter. Also found my parsley is still going strong, so what I'm going to do is collect it, chop it all up, put it in some freezer trays, and freeze the parsley. So I've got little tablespoonful cubes of fresh parsley through the winter. So any herbs that you see that are still thriving, collect it, because you really don't have a lot more time. And if you've got something that good like this, it's best to harvest it and use it while you can. One thing you want to keep in mind is pruning. So once we get all of our leaves kind of raked up, we're going to kind of go through and figure out what needs to be pruned, which, depending on the varietal and when things flower, you kind of need to know what you can prune and what you can't at this late date. So keep a running list of what plants need a light pruning in October, and make sure to get that done before the frost. One thing you don't do is prune roses. I know they look horrible at this late date, but that's okay. Right now they need to store for the winter, so don't cut your roses. Fall is also a really great time to harvest seeds. So like dried seed pods, like this is columbine. And actually this is a native columbine I got from the Nature Center. So getting seeds from dried pods and storing them in like even just a paper envelope, and labeling them and storing them in just a cool, dry place will be all set to go come spring. And you can do some seed starting in April if you'd like. Now, not all seeds work. You have to know like what you can propagate from seeds, but this is definitely the time to go through your garden and see what you can collect and what you would want to propagate. Also, there's some fall planting you can do. Like, here's some alliums that I'm going to get in the ground. Alliums you can plant between September and October. It is getting late in the season, so I really have to get these in the ground. But I also have some other plants that I've been waiting to get in the ground as well, some ground cover. And also, if you go to Home Depot, they're getting rid of a lot of plants right now. So I've gotten some really great deals, 50, 60% off plants. Everything looks like hell anyway. So it doesn't really matter if it looks root bound and horrible, because the garden's all, I mean, look at this, it's all overgrown, and you know, it's a fall garden now. So, you know, you can score some good deals, get them in the ground, hopefully before you have the first snow so they can get established. Maybe use a root hormone to kind of get the roots established quicker if you end up buying some root bound plants at the garden center. So think about that too. Some fall planting, some bulb planting right now is key. Definitely do it before really hard frost and snow comes. So I need to get my gardening gloves and get these bulbs in. Here are my alliums, and you always want to plant them about 6 to 8 inches down deep. And you see where all that fuzzy root system is? That goes down on the bottom. And the pointy bulb goes on the top, right? So that goes on the bottom, that goes on the top, pop them in. And most bulbs will have kind of a stringy little root system bottom. Always goes down. We're covering up the potting bench with tarp and bungees, like I said. And you can see we use bungee cords around the bottom to cinch everything together. And if we can, and the tarp's big enough, we'll also kind of tuck them under the legs of things. Plastic garbage bags are also really great in fall cleanup. This was my compost bin. It's an old hamper, like I mentioned, and I turned it upside down, put plastic on it, tucked it underneath. So there's some plastic covering the bottom, and this should be protected at least for another season. The hamper cost me $2, so you know, if I lose it, I lose it. But it's been great to keep compost in. I want to try and keep it. So use plastic bags to help you if you don't have tarp, and you know, you've got stuff that you don't really have room for under the deck, and it's filled with stuff that's too heavy. You don't really want to move it. And we've done a good job covering with tarp. That's the potting bench. So stuff is covered for the most part. I'm just going to finish now my fall bulbs, and then we're on to the next thing. 6 inches, in you go. Cover it up. So one of the final things I'm doing for my fall chores, as I mentioned before, are some rose care. Now, I learned my rose care. Here's one of my other roses. From the rosarian over at this really great garden center in Chicago. If you're ever in Chicago, check it out. It's called Gethsemane Garden Center. And she's amazing. And she told me when I got my first rose from her not to cover them with the styrofoam cones like a lot of people do. You end up suffocating your rose. So what you do is you stop cutting it back around September, early September, end of August, and you just kind of let it die, and it's gonna look like hell like mine do right now. They might get, like here, some black spot because it's been wet, but you know, it's just gonna slow down the growth. Every time you cut, it stimulates the roots. So now you're trying to tell the root system with the new cold weather, you know, slow down and start keeping nutrients for the winter. The only thing you have to do, she told me, is mound up some mulch really nice and high around the root in a nice big hill, covering up the root stock and some of the canes. So that's what I've done for years. Just As you can see, it gets up really high. I'd say about a foot around. And that's it. And they come back in the spring, you know, really great. And then you can look at my video on how to prune a rose bush in the spring, because that's when you kind of get things going. But as far as fall, it's very minimal. And this has worked out for me. In fact, look. Don't look at my horrible siding that we need to get redone next year. It's totally falling apart. But look at this beautiful rose. I'm still getting roses. This is my rambling white cottage English rose. It's so pretty. Anyway, all right, I gotta finish mulching my roses, and then we'll kind of take stock of what else we have to finish. We're real close. This has been a 2-day kind of yard project, getting ready for fall. Okay, so we are at the final stage of our kind of winterizing our yard, and it's time to get our lawn ready for winter and really spring. Fall is a great time to do some winterizing and some fertilizing, even more so than the spring. So my husband just mowed, and we also know that it's going to rain in the next couple days. So that's also good to do, because the rain will get the fertilizer and the winterizer down. Here it goes. Another thing you want to do on your winterizing day is kind of the fun stuff. Decorating for fall. Like my pretty burlap wreath, and I got pumpkins and witches and all that stuff. So while you're doing all this hard work, be sure to put some fun in and decorate, because Halloween is just a couple weeks away. So that's about it. I did forget one thing, and that is to do a final journaling of what you've done. Because if you're like me, you start with a plan, and then depending on what seeds come up, what sales are around, neighbors give you cuttings, you start putting things everywhere. So even today with my fall bulbs and plantings, I've put some things here and there. So be sure to do a final journaling of what you've done, so you can keep track when spring comes, what's coming up where, and you don't want to dig up stuff. Like for instance here, these are kind of my teenage starter plants that we've got over here. So I got a lot to journal today. So that's it. Thanks for joining us on our winterizing the yard day. Happy gardening, happy fall.